Is William Hill gambling with its future? Welcome to Mark and Pete. Here's a thought.
If you ride your luck and then come unstuck, some may say it's just horses for courses. But a fast buck can quickly run amok, and that's what gambling endorses.
Yeah, it sure does.
Well, 3 gambling firms, William Hill, are to pay a record fine of £19.2 million, and this is for failing to protect consumers and weak anti-money laundering controls. Now, the Gambling Commission found that new customers were able to bet large sums over very short periods without any proper checks. In fact, in one particular case, a customer was allowed to open up a brand new account and spent £23,000 in just 20 minutes without any checks. Closerman Pete, I ask you, do you think that William Hill's fine was justified? And more importantly, what other checks and measures should be put in place to stop this happening again?
Well, here's what I think about this sort of betting procedure. I think there is a responsibility to stop people from effectively accidentally losing money. They get caught up in the moment and they make too large a bet and can lose it. And there needs to be checks in place to stop that happen, to stop the speed at which you can spend, and to stop the overall amount, I think, as well, is important. But I don't think that fines are the answer, to be honest. I think really what they need is their money back. Because if a customer has done that, now, yes. I think that would concentrate the mind, let's put it that way.
Well, indeed. Now, the interesting thing is that the Gambling Commission actually uncovered several failures to guard against possible money laundering, and many other issues with consumers being able to bet. You want to view this, and one person, ironically, a separate individual, was able to spend and lose £70,000 in a month. Now, while another deposited £73,535 and lost £14,068 in 4 months, basically staggering sums of money. Now, we don't know the person of those individuals, but irrespective of that, these are staggering sums. And what is interesting is this is not the first time, folks, that betting companies, gambling companies, are allowing this to happen. What we've seen with the proliferation of gambling is that there are a lot of online gambling firms now where you can basically sign up, put your details in, and in theory you're meant to put measures and checks in place to stop you going over a certain limit. Now, of course, when you walk into a betting shop, it's a different situation when you've got cash in hand. And when that happens, it's very difficult to control whether an individual could walk to another betting shop and carry on gambling. So I think that there are some flaws in the overall checks. But to me, what I am concerned about is that this is a dilemma for a government, any government, and not just the UK government. Any government throughout the world knows that lots of revenues are made, taxes basically, folks, from gambling. And it's a difficult we've got here is that research has shown that when times are tough, when the economy is bad, that the vulnerable are at their weakest, and they often turn to gambling. And so that, to me, is really where I think I have the concerns, is how do you put even in harsher measures? Should it be that it's not just a limit on this? So you mentioned about perhaps, the fines are not enough. Maybe it's suspending the license for longer periods. So, for example, let's just speak generically. We're not picking on any given gambling firm. But if somebody were to be found guilty, what about suspending their license for 6 months? That's going to be damaging to their business. That might get them to sort of think a little bit better about nurturing people in. Maybe there should be some form of register. And what I mean by that is when you, and I know that there's going to be a lot of consumers saying, look, we don't want our details put on a central register. But there are some people who, have given up their details because they've registered online, they've put in their account details, etc. So there is a central repository where people have already decided to share their data. Now, is there a way maybe that essentially that is something where you could see as a gambling organization that if somebody even walked into a betting shop, you just simply have a reference code and somebody would say, sorry, you've already gambled online, you can't gamble in store. And because I think that there are some obvious gaps in terms of, going, say, for example, to the horse racing. You could still walk into, a great showcase, whether it be the Grand National or anyone else, and you could pay a lot of money to play and bet. And yet who's to stop you? Nothing is there to stop you. So to me, I know there's a lot of good measures in place, but if somebody was to fall foul of this, it can be life changing. And many gamblers have said that it's such an addiction they just can't stop, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Now I feel that there is a special problem with what you all called odds betting, where you'll give in your bet you place a certain amount of money, and depending on how likely what you're betting on is to happen, you will get more or less in return. So, take for example, in a horse race, you're betting on simplest case, you bet on a certain horse to win, but it's not that likely to win, so it's 55 to 1 or whatever it might be. And if that happens, you put £1, you get £56 back. If that would be the way it worked. Now,
yes.
But of course, if you put £10 or £1,000 down, you get significantly more. So there's always, in that sort of betting, a temptation to put more down on your bet, because you're going to get more in return, and suddenly it looks like a great fortune, but you're actually losing quite a lot of money in the process. Now, if you're calculating that correctly, and you've budgeted for how much you're going to spend, then I personally don't see that there's any wrong with it. It's just not something I would do myself. I don't have any interest in it, but I don't think there's any wrong with it. In the Bible, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, it says, "Keep your life free from love of money. Be content with what you had. For he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you." So the idea is you can trust in God to look after you. So don't keep trying to get more and more money. Don't be desperate for it. Now, so it's that love of money that causes a problem. If it's the entertainment value, then you can put a cap on it and it will be entertaining.
Yeah.
Now, the other side of it, as you know, is the addiction to risk. And that is really like any other addiction, and that would be dealt with by the companies such as William Hill, putting a limit on what you've got to do. So I think there are ways of addressing this, but in terms of our own personal involvement, the focusing on acquiring more and more money, if that's taken out of it, it could still be an entertainment. As long as it's small amounts of money that are well within what you can afford to lose, then there's no issue with it that I can see.
Well, that may be true. Now, what's interesting is that studies have shown that in Britain, on average, 22.5 million people gamble each year and spend less than £300 in total. Now, that's on average. But, of course, the mechanisms are there, but are they really sufficient? I'm not entirely sure that they are. But I think that let's look at it the other way in terms of assistance and help. So there are many charities that help people with gambling. One such is charity GamCare. Now, what they do is they provide information, advice, support for many people who have gambling problems. And what they typically tend to do is they advise individuals to either talk to friends, talk to a family member, maybe even talk to the clergy. Why not? If you know your local clergyman very well, certainly get help. The other one, of course, is about restricted access on sites. There are practical tools that you can use, and people can put blocks on them so they can help. The other one, which is an obvious one, isn't it, which is putting blocks on your card. So many retail banks now offer the ability to sort of block cards. And I think that's quite interesting in that you can sort of try and put these little steps in place. Now, there are many other things as well. As clergyman Pete said, is that really it's about thinking about gambling in a different way. If you're hooked on it, you definitely need help. But maybe the lure is not so much the prize of the money. It's more around the sort of the winning. Dare I say, even I know that many people would know this phrase, sportsman's bet, which is you're effectively not gambling for money. You're just determining who might win and who may not win. Those are the sort of things that I think that you've got to try and tackle it in different ways. But clergyman Pete, I ask in terms of where the church can help in this matter. So there are lots of gambling charities, as we've highlighted, but where does the church play in this?
Well, what the church does is, speaking for my church, but it's churches across the country, in addition to praying for people when they to have the strength to cope with addiction, there are specialist charities such as Christians Against Poverty, which will point you in the right direction and get counselling, and they run a course called Life Skills, which is running one of my churches and churches across the country, which is training, which includes prayer, in helping you to cope with exactly this sort of situation, looking after your money while still being entertained. By the way, I think we both talked in terms of regulation and trying to tighten up these regulations and punishments for those who don't adhere to them and that sort of thing. We're not talking about banning, because I would say that banning it would be counterproductive. It all goes underground.
Agreed.
And you can't see what's happening. You can't tax it.
Yeah.
And then also I just think it's wrong. If people find something entertaining, it's not actually sinful. We should just find a safe way for them to do it.
Well, I think that's interesting what you just mentioned there, and there is a lesson, and it's actually ironically in our lifetime, folks, which is the Gambling Acts that came in the 1960s definitely worked in the sense of trying to avoid it from going underground. At one time, folks, actually, these institutes didn't have the same license as we now know. And of course, by putting those in, you're absolutely right. It's not to say that we're going to suppress it or anyone should suppress it. It's about doing it in moderation and about doing it with care and attention. Clergyman Pete, I was going to mention just as one point, because I think it would be good for anyone listening, but the National Gambling Helpline is one that is 24 hours, and I just thought we could put that number out. So the free phone number is 0808 8020 133. And I think for anyone who is listening and perhaps needs some advice, that might be worth just having a quick conversation.
Yeah, we'll make sure that is in the notes for this episode. Thanks for listening, and please do make a comment below. You just go to markandpete.com, make sure that you're subscribed, and you can leave a comment on this and every episode. We'd love to hear your views on this, whether you're having difficulties or whether you've got ideas for how to regulate it better, whatever it might be. Just leave a comment. But for this time, from Mark and myself, it's a goodbye for now, and I'll bet you'll be back to come and listen to more Mark and Pete next time. Bye for now.